It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight with special coverage of Donald Trump's second state visit to Britain. The US President, who will touch down later this hour, says it's a great honour and he's looking forward to seeing his friend the King.
They've never used Windsor Castle for this before. They used Buckingham Palace. And I don't want to say one's better than the other, but they say Windsor Castle is the ultimate, right?
Air Force One will be landing at Stansted Airport in Essex. The President will then make his way by helicopter to the US Ambassador's residence in central London. Tomorrow it is the pomp and pageantry of Windsor. Not that the locals will see much of it, with huge barriers forming part of an unprecedented security operation. And the protests against this visit have already started. This the scene outside Windsor Castle tonight, and much bigger demonstrations planned for tomorrow.
And I'm Yalda Hakim, live here in Kiev, where no doubt Ukraine's president will be watching keenly the events unfolding in the UK as Donald Trump arrives for his much-anticipated second state visit. Volodymyr Zelensky has told me that President Trump is the only person who can stop Vladimir Putin, and he's hoping Sir Keir Starmer can get a commitment from Mr. Trump on Ukraine's defense.
Я дуже надіюсь, що у прем'єр-міністра
I very much hope that Prime Minister Starmer will be able to have a very specific discussion on the security guarantees of the United States for Ukraine.
Donald Trump will land later this hour for his second state visit to the UK. The US President leaving Washington earlier this afternoon, telling reporters he was honoured and calling Windsor Castle the ultimate ahead of the state banquet there tomorrow night. Well, this is the scene at Stansted Airport this evening. Air Force One to land there shortly. The President will then be whisked straight away in his helicopter Marine One to the US Ambassador's residence, which is in Regent's Park in central London. Well, it promises to be a busy couple of days for Mr. Trump, who's sure to receive a warm welcome from the King tomorrow, if not the protesters planning to gather at Windsor Castle. In a moment, we'll be speaking to our royal correspondent, Rhiannon Mills, who is in Windsor tonight as the King prepares to welcome the President for that state banquet. We're also going to be joined by our International Affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, who is at the US Ambassador's residence, where the President will be staying tonight. Dominic, I'll come to you first. We heard from President Trump before he boarded his plane to come here to the UK, saying it's a huge honour for him, this second state visit.
Yeah, he's clearly very excited about it, and I'm outside Winfield House, as you say. That is the residence of the American ambassador in London. It's a huge neo-Georgian pile on the edge of Regent's Park, and it has the second biggest garden in London after Buckingham Palaces, and in the middle of that garden there's a huge lawn, and on that Donald Trump will land in Marine One at some point later on this evening. 9:30, 10ish we expect, and he'll be flying here, of course, from Stansted Airport, and he'll be greeted by the American ambassador here, and it's the first of three stately homes that will be the venue of this three-day visit, because he will go on then to Windsor Castle the next day, and then to the Prime Minister's residence and country retreat in Chequers on the last day. You know, as you say, he has said on the way here, and I think his arrival might be slightly delayed because he spoke for so long outside the White House, but in those comments he said and made it pretty clear that primarily he's interested in the kind of pageantry and the pomp and circumstance, and the fact that he's going to be the centre of attention for 3 days at the heart of this royal visit. And he was at pains to point out that it is an unprecedented honour. No elected leader has ever been given this honour of a second state visit. It's controversial because of who he is. A lot of people and critics saying that Keir Starmer moved too quickly to extend that invitation so early on in his presidency. It's something he should have worked towards and then be rewarded for, and improving relations and giving Britain special treatment for. But, you know, that's the Prime Minister's choice. He chose to give this honour to Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is going to lap it up and make the most of it, as he made pretty clear on the way out of the White House earlier on today.
Dominic, thank you. Well, as the President has stated on numerous occasions, he likes the UK, he likes the Prime Minister, but he loves the royal family. Let's bring in our royal correspondent, Rhiannon Mills, who is in Windsor for us tonight. And that really is where the pageantry will be taking place tomorrow, Rhiannon, a full day of it for the President. Just talk us through what he will expect.
Well, I think it was interesting that he was saying that Windsor is particularly special. We saw President Macron, he had a state visit here, and it is a really spectacular setting. But back in April, Donald Trump described how his second state visit was going to be a fest. You might remember that. I suspect there are a few people at the Foreign Office and the Palace who maybe spat their tea out at that description. But in some ways, he really is not wrong. They are rolling out every bit of red carpet, every bell and whistle that they can possibly find. And the Ministry of Defence certainly aren't being coy about it when they say this is going to be the largest military ceremonial welcome for a state visit to the UK in living memory. Now, that is quite something to say. So what you need to watch out for tomorrow is we're going to have US and UK military jets taking part in a flypast, the largest guard of honour that's ever been seen during a state visit. Also, a US military band is going to be involved in the proceedings as well. So really emphasising those military ties between our two countries. And of course, the spectacular backdrop is going to be here at Windsor. Here's my report. It is the fairy tale setting for the ultimate state visit, but even this fortress has needed a little extra for welcoming the UK's controversial friend. Of all of the big royal events, this feels like it is on another level. Not just what we're doing to make sure that the president stays safe, but also to avoid him seeing anything that might upset him, such as those protests. After all, this is a man who regularly changes his mind, and this week is all about making sure he leaves feeling only positive thoughts towards the United Kingdom. And that's why everything about this state visit is meant to be bigger and better. Thousands of soldiers and horses on parade, with more pageantry than we've seen for any other world leader, a symbol of our vital military ties.
We're putting as much as we can into this as well. There's a few other extra things thrown in there with a beating retreat. It's a big part of what we do is we are part of the sort of PLC of the country, and it's really important that we put the best foot forward as we can to show off our nation in the best light that we can. So it's a lot of pressure, but an enormous privilege.
Especially with President Trump coming over, it's one of our greatest allies. I think it's only right that we show a good welcome to the country.
It will be helped by the fact that already the president has developed his own special relationship with both King Charles.
He's a beautiful man, a wonderful man, and we appreciate it. I've known him, gotten to know him very well, actually.
And Prince William.
He's a good man, this one.
But Prince Andrew will be absent. Heavily involved in Trump's last state visit, he does live on the Windsor estate, but now no longer a working royal because of his own links to the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein, a scandal that Trump really doesn't want to be reminded of. But one that has ramped up the interest in this state visit even further. The stage now set for the overnight stay that Donald Trump has always dreamt of. And the royal family know for a man who is obsessed with the monarchy, it's again up to them to fly the flag. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News, at Windsor Castle. Of course, it is going to be one of those days where the body language experts and the lip readers are going to have an absolute field day. We have sensed the excitement around this for Donald Trump for some months, over the last few months. You speak, though, to those in diplomatic circles, and they are very aware that for some people this state visit does feel uncomfortable. He is a controversial figure. Of course, you had all the issues with the Epstein scandal, Ukraine, just to mention a few, but they will insist in diplomatic circles this visit is absolutely essential. It has been really essential that we give him this honour a second time round. This is the most important bilateral relationship we have in the world. And that means tomorrow we are going to see the royal family again deployed in force as, in a way, our diplomats in chief with the likes of the Prime Minister on their coattails, making sure the President, again goes home happy.
Rhiannon, thank you. Rhiannon Mills, our royal correspondent at Windsor Castle for us tonight. Let's go to Stansted Airport. This is Marine One just landing at Stansted Airport. That is the US President's helicopter that will take him to the ambassador's residence in central London as soon as Air Force One, his plane, lands there at Stansted tonight. It's due to land before 9 o'clock. But Marine One standing by and ready for the President's arrival, as is Mark Stone, our US correspondent. He's also at Stansted Airport. Mark, Rhiannon there just talking through why the President's visit is a big deal to the UK. The question is, what will be in it for President Trump?
To be honest, I think there's a lot more in it for the British government than there is for President Trump. He is going to have a fest, as he calls it. He's going to enjoy the next couple of days for sure. I hope you can hear me over the engines, the rotors of Marine One. In fact, two helicopters which have just pulled up here at the private aviation terminal at Stansted Airport. You know, the past couple of hours, SJ, have really reminded me of what it looks like when the American president moves, when the American president travels. It is really quite something. The helicopters that you're looking at here, these are the regular helicopters that he travels in wherever he goes, and they've been flown here on the back or inside transport aircraft all the way to the UK for him to travel from here in Stansted, the short journey down to Winfield House where Dom is in Regent's Park. That will happen shortly after he arrives here. We're expecting Air Force One to land in around about 40 minutes' time. It might be slightly delayed. The first person who'll greet him is I think, a hint of some of the awkwardness of this visit, because it is protocol dictates that it's the Foreign Secretary who greets him off the steps of Air Force One. Now, the person that holds that role, she's only been in it 2 weeks. She is Yvette Cooper. And so naturally, we looked up what she has said about Donald Trump in the past. You may think this is a cheap shot. Perhaps it is. But I also think it's relevant. If you look at what Yvette Cooper has said in the past, she's called him inflammatory and ignorant. This, of course, before she was in government. And very interestingly, she opposed Trump's last state visit. Now, she opposed that state visit because she said that Donald Trump was a threat to democracy and was alienating allies. Now, it's perfectly possible to argue that he is all of those things still, that he is still a disruptor, that he is still a threat to democracy. Certainly many people would see him as such. So what's changed? Well, we don't know whether Yvette Cooper's personal opinion has changed, but what has changed, and I think those goes to the heart of your question, is that Trump has proved in his second term that he is all-powerful. Certainly in the short term, he has the cards, he calls the shots. And the position of the British government now, although Starmer is by no means aligned to Trump politically, the position of the British government is that it is absolutely necessary, fundamental, to have America as close as you can get them for reasons of trade, foreign policy, security, all the rest of it. And so warts and all, controversy and all, that is what this state visit is all about. It's about flattery. It's about keeping the American president close. And look, I think the British government is in a good position. Our trading arrangements with the United States under Trump, they're not as good as they were under Biden, but they are much, much better than most countries around the world. So that gives you a hint of why the British government is rolling out the red carpet. And my goodness, they will over the day ahead.
They will indeed. Mark Stone waiting there at Stansted Airport for the arrival of President Donald Trump, as Mark said, slightly delayed, expecting him to touch down at Stansted Airport in around 40 minutes' time. Mark standing by and will alert us when the President arrives. Mark Stone, thank you for the moment. So plenty of business and diplomacy to go with the pageantry over the next couple of days, as Mark was outlining there. The government will be hoping to smooth over disagreements on subjects such as the Middle East and Ukraine. However, the fallout from the Jeffrey Epstein scandal is a headache for both Sir Keir Starmer and Donald Trump. Well, joining now from Westminster is Tamara Cohen to talk about this, because Tamara, this is the another uncomfortable element to this visit happening in the days before Donald Trump's arrival. Of course, the Prime Minister sacking Lord Mandelson from his role as ambassador because of his links to Epstein, but the President has links to Jeffrey Epstein himself.
Yeah, absolutely incredible backdrop to this trip. Downing Street will obviously hope that it is drama-free, that after enjoying the royals, the coach, the white tie banquet and all the trappings of the royal side of the state visit, that when Donald Trump on day 2 goes to Chequers to meet Keir Starmer and his wife to have important talks, that the story that will come out of it is one about trade, is one about US investment, which has already been announced at over £1 billion into the UK to generate jobs in different parts of the country. They also want to talk about steel and some of the issues in the trade deal that the two men agreed earlier this year. Donald Trump said before he got on the plane that he'd done a great deal with the UK, but that the UK wanted to refine it. And that's right, although the UK has managed where other European countries have failed to get tariffs down in some areas like cars, the steel industry is still struggling under those 25% tariffs. So getting a good news story on that would certainly lift the gloom for Keir Starmer's government. So they're hoping a bit of Donald Trump's stardust and some good business announcements will help heal what's been a very difficult last couple of weeks. But of course, the big risk is that they get hit with questions about the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. We assume that after their meeting, Keir Starmer and Donald Trump will do a press conference. There's the potential for questions about it. And there are questions for Keir Starmer. Earlier tonight, my colleague Sophie Ridge interviewed Lord Glassman, who is a Labour peer, but more importantly, the only Labour figure to be invited to the inauguration of Donald Trump because he'd struck up a friendship with J.D. Vance. And while he was there, Lord Glassman told us, he was asked lots of questions about Peter Mandelson. This is what he said.
People would walk up to me with photos of Peter Mandelson blowing out birthday candles with Jeffrey Epstein, going shopping, clothes shopping. I was the Labour guy there. I reported back to Number 10 that really I would really think again about this appointment because it was bound to happen.
Yeah.
This was not out of the clear blue sky, was it? I mean, everybody knew.
What did Number 10 say then when you said that to them?
Nothing. I mean, they asked me to send a report, and I sent a report. That was that. There was no further... I did say when I got back, I'd think again about this publicly, and then I did get a discreet suggestion to basically shut up about that, and I did.
So Lord Glassman, a Labour figure, saying he warned Number 10, warned them in a report about hiring Lord Mandelson as US ambassador because of those links with Jeffrey Epstein, which were already known about, in addition to what has come out in the last few days. So the risk for Keir Starmer is that the whole thing gets dominated by questions about that, and that threatens to overshadow the good news he hopes will come from this Donald Trump visit.
Thank you, Tamara Cohen, with the latest there from Westminster. We can cross live now to Kyiv. Ukraine's leaders eagerly watching this visit of Donald Trump to the UK and hoping the Prime Minister can ensure that its Western countries have the ear of President Trump and not Vladimir Putin. As you can see, my colleague Yalda Hakim is in Kyiv for us tonight. Yalda.
SJ, thank you so much. And as you're saying, Volodymyr Zelensky has told me that Donald Trump needs to adopt a clear position on sanctions against Russia and security guarantees for Ukraine to stop Vladimir Putin and end the war. In an exclusive interview, the Ukrainian president said the only way for the fighting to stop was for defined security guarantees to be put in place first. And he said that can only happen if Donald Trump is bold. And of course, for the people of Ukraine, this war rumbles on. These pictures from this morning show a Russian drone hitting a building in central Kharkiv, close to a busy market. A local military official said it's obvious that the goal was to target civilians, and it's a miracle that no one was killed. Well, it's against that backdrop that I met with Mr. Zelensky, a man desperately trying to resist Russian aggression while trying to keep his biggest ally on side. In a wide-ranging interview, he told me what he wants to see from President Trump and Sir Keir Starmer over the next few days, and repeated his warnings that Mr. Trump is being tricked by Vladimir Putin. Have a listen. Do you believe that meeting in Alaska was a mistake?
Я вважаю, що
I
вона
think
дала дуже багато.
it gave a lot to Putin, and I believe if it was a trilateral meeting, we would have some result, because Putin wanted to meet the president of the United States, Trump. He wanted to escape from political isolation, and I believe he should have paid more. He should have received a setback in this war and stop. But instead, he received de-isolation. He got photos with President Trump. He received a public dialogue. And I think this opens the doors for Putin into some other summits and formats, because that's how it is, and we see that. We're observing this, and I don't think he paid anything for it. But he should pay, firstly, because he started the war, and secondly, because
Trying, yes, to way out, finding to way out from isolation.
Therefore, it's very important not to give Putin this space, because otherwise he won't feel that compelled that he has to stop the war. Because why? I mean, if he's fighting, if he's waging the war, and everyone is trying to stop him by arguing, by asking him, but instead, force should be used. He understands force. That's his language. That's the language he understands. He doesn't speak many languages, but that's the language of force he understands, just like Russian, you know, his mother tongue. And we ask very much our countries, European and US countries, to do that, to show that. Yes, they take steps, such as sanctions, for example, but more needs to be done, quicker.
Do you think that Vladimir Putin is trying to manipulate and trick Donald Trump?
Він точно хоче.
He definitely wants to trick the US. He's doing everything he can to avoid sanctions, to prevent US and Trump from putting sanctions on him. And if you keep postponing applying sanctions any further, then the Russians will be better prepared.
Mr. President, Donald Trump is coming to the UK for a second state visit. What message do you have to him?
Я дуже надіюсь, що у прем'єр-міністра
I very much hope that Prime Minister Starmer will be able to have a very specific discussion on the security guarantees of the United States for Ukraine. And before we end the war, I really want to have all the agreements in place. I want to have a document that is supported by the US and all European partners. This is very important. This is a very motivating thing for a Ukrainian military, so that they realize we will end the war and we will be protected. And to make this happen, we need a clear position of the President Trump. Next, we should be able to buy any weapons, except the nuclear weapons, of course, from the United States. Important weapons, missiles, rockets, etc. For us, this is very important. And the third point, strong personal steps made by President Trump to stop Putin.
Well, that was Volodymyr Zelensky speaking to me exclusively there. Let's go straight to our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, who joins me now from the US ambassador's residence in central London. And Dom, you and I have been dissecting this interview with Volodymyr Zelensky for the last day or so about, the nuances of that interview. He frankly wanted to send a very clear message to Donald Trump, knowing that he's coming there for that second state visit and wanting these these two leaders to have Volodymyr Zelensky and Ukraine front and centre of their conversations.
Yeah, and I think what he's done really is is shone a light on just one of a number of issues that have opened up in terms of the differences between Britain and America since that invitation for an unprecedented second state visit was extended to the US president back in February in the Oval Office. Since then, a gulf has opened up on not just Ukraine, but also Gaza, on international trade, on Epstein, other issues like that. And the job for ministers here is to sort of try and paper over that and make as much as they can out of this visit without those differences being an issue. And I don't think Zelensky has helped them in that ambition at all, of course. But the difference there is that we now have an American president who seems to be siding with Russia pretty much openly in terms of how he wants the war to end, and very much at odds with his European allies. They want to see a ceasefire. They want to see much more severe sanctions imposed. Donald Trump just can't bring himself to agree with either of those. But it's not just Ukraine, it's also Gaza. As we see the pictures of Donald Trump in Windsor Castle and Winfield House, and check us later in the week, we're also going to see pictures of the Israeli offensive in Gaza City, part of a campaign that a prestigious UN report has now branded as genocidal, something I think many members of the ruling party and Labour government would agree with. We're going to see those pictures kind of split screen with the American president, who has given the Israelis a carte blanche to carry out this campaign and offensive happening in Gaza. That's going to cause disquiet. And then there's all the concern about the international trade policy, very unorthodox approach to trade that Donald Trump has. Yes, Britain has secured a slightly more favourable deal, it seems, although there's a lot of devil in the detail than Europe has. But there's more detail to be worked out, and there's huge disquiet amongst the British government as to where this trade policy and tariff policy is going to lead the global economy later on. And of course, then there was all this sort of stench really around the Epstein affair. You know, not to put too fine a point on it, but the Prime Minister and the King are going to be hosting a president who is tainted by association, his association with an infamous paedophile, and the Manderson scandal or affair has sort of cast more of a light on that as well. So all of that is going to make this, in some senses, a sort of exercise in nose-holding for the Starmer government as they put aside their differences, their disquiet, their queasiness, if you like, about this president, and hope that the visit will achieve more than that. If you talk to former diplomats, they say the special relationship is about more than one man, however controversial he is. It's about using Britain's royal history, its pageantry, a card that no other European nation has, to win over this president. Their critics, of course, say that Keir Starmer extended this visit too early, and whatever this does to sort of curry goodwill with the American president may not be something that he will stick to because he is so unpredictable. So the critics would say none of this will be worth it. But the government is determined to make the most of this, and we're going to see, I think, all the stops pulled out to try and make this visit a success.
Indeed, Dom, thank you so much. And you're looking at those live pictures of Marine One getting ready for the arrival of Donald Trump. We're expecting him in the next 20 minutes or so. Once he lands on Air Force One, he and his wife Melania will be whisked away to where Dom was, the US ambassador's residence, and that's where he'll be spending the evening before the pomp and pageantry begin. But for now, SJ, back to you in the studio.
Yalda, thank you so much. Yalda Hakim in Kiev for us this evening. Well, away from the Trump visit, some significant breaking news this evening coming out of the High Court, which has tonight blocked an Eritrean asylum seeker's removal to France. Olivia Guthrie has been following this breaking news for us. Olivia, what can you tell us? And in terms of the government's much heralded one-in, one-out scheme, where does this leave us?
I mean, this is the latest last-minute legal challenge to the government's deportation flights. As you say, part of that one-in, one-out deal with France, where we send people back who've come over on small boats in exchange for taking people who have applied for asylum, as the government would see it, through the proper channels. Now, this case involved a 25-year-old Eritrean man who had come to the UK on a small boat and who was due to be deported tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. But tonight, a High Court judge has given him a temporary injunction and giving his lawyers 14 days for further representations. Now, of course, this is going to be another blow to the Prime Minister, who is using this policy to try and deter people from making those dangerous crossings. And it follows reports that a second deportation flight has taken off from Heathrow today with not a single migrant on board. And it also follows the news that more than 31,000 people now have made that Channel crossing so far this year, which is a new record. Now, the Tories say that this shows that the government is weak on this issue, but Downing Street are insisting, they are certainly denying that their policy is a shambles. They are also denying that the courts are hampering their efforts. They insist that these deportation flights will be taking off with migrants on board imminently.
OK. Just not tonight. OK, Olivia, thank you. Olivia Guthrie there following that story for us this evening here on Sky News. Still to come on the UK tonight, we'll return to Stansted Airport. We are standing by to see President Trump land, expected within the next 20 minutes or so. These are live pictures of Marine One waiting to whisk him to central London soon after he touches down. And I'm going to speak to opposition to the president's visit in Windsor.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace. The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland. Catholics and Protestants now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19, religion's nothing.
Sky News, the full story first.
This is seen live at Stansted Airport tonight. You're looking at Marine One, the president's helicopter that has been flown over on the back of an aircraft for his three-day state visit to the UK. We are awaiting the arrival of Air Force One, carrying the president and the First Lady. They will disembark onto Marine One and head into central London to stay at the ambassador's residence tonight before that state visit at Windsor Castle tomorrow. Day three will see the president travel to the Prime Minister's country residence checkers. But we are anticipating the president to land within the next 20 minutes or so. We'll bring it to you live here on Sky News. And it has been quite the build-up to this visit, a lot of preparation going into it, a lot of pageantry tomorrow. Also protesters, another P, thousands of people expecting to take to the streets in protest against this state visit. This the scene in Windsor tonight. Dozens of people already there showing their opposition to Trump's state visits. Much bigger protests are expected tomorrow. And earlier this week, protesters rolled out this banner. It features a picture of Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. As you can see, it was displayed near Windsor Castle. It looks like it's on the Long Walk there. The president's staying the night at the castle tomorrow. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent Ashna Huranag, who has been following the build-up to this state visit. She's been taking a look at the security preparations. Of course, there's a ring of steel around Windsor, not just to protect the president, Ashna, but also, it seems, to keep the protesters away, because, as I said, thousands of people expected in Windsor, but President Trump may not actually see them.
No, it's unlikely he'll see them in person, but if he turns on his television screens, I mean, for sure, I think he might indeed catch a glimpse. I mean, protesters that I've spoken to today in Windsor, Sarah-Jane, they say this really was the warm-up to the main event. They are promising a real theatrical scene tomorrow, full of colour, full of fun and full of very, very loud chants, some of which we heard today. Look, many of them were carrying their placards, their banners, some caricatures even of the president himself. Many of them described this visit as embarrassing. They described it as being an unnecessary second state visit, unprecedented, one which they didn't see Donald Trump deserving at all. They say they feel as though this government has casted a very unfair judgment when it comes to giving this such formal, prestigious invitation to him. And all of this opulence, many of them said, look, it's just so wasteful. They didn't feel as though it was needed. And I put to them, you know, this is a real sense of soft power here. We've got a card that we can play in the UK that not many other countries can. But even to that, they sort of were quite disagreeing of him even being here in the first place. You mentioned that giant banner, that unfurling of that huge banner on the Long Walk of Epstein and Trump. That image will be one that we'll be seeing repeated tomorrow, that's for sure. But you're right to touch on this security operation, Sarah-Jane. It is nothing like I've seen before, quite frankly. From the water, from the land to the air. I mean, even today we've seen American military helicopters in the skies, and the same has been said for the past few days. Today, the press tents are set up in preparation. All eyes are on Windsor Castle. But tomorrow, there will be some 1,600 police officers in central London as tens of thousands of people take to the streets protesting against him being here. The government and the palace have gone to extraordinary lengths to make sure that he is kept happy, that he doesn't see any of those protesters. No public-facing moment for him that we are expecting, but those protesters will be hoping to drown out that pageantry.
Ashna, thank you. Ashna Huranag in Windsor for us tonight. Well, for more on the protest, let's now speak to Jake Atkinson, who is from the Stop Trump Coalition. Jake, good of you to join us tonight ahead of what I'm sure you'll expect to be a busy day tomorrow. What is your plan for protesting tomorrow in Windsor?
Well, I'm sure there will be people making their voices heard in Windsor, but thousands and thousands of people across the UK will be descending on central London to make their voices heard, to say that Donald Trump is not welcome here. We do not agree that the UK government should be rolling out the red carpet for Donald Trump and his big oil, big tech barons, where there are children right now in Gaza being killed from the skies, dying from starvation as a result of a genocide that Trump's administration is fueling, is funding, and is providing diplomatic cover for. So for him to have a state banquet right now is really offensive to many thousands of people across this country. And so people will be protesting in central London, and you're right, there is a lot of security in Windsor and elsewhere because Donald Trump is running scared because he knows the British public do not agree with him and do not want him here.
Jake, I get your points and as to why people will be turning out tomorrow to speak out against this state visit. It will be for many reasons, many of which you've outlined there. But it has been said on this programme tonight, a lot of our correspondents saying, you know, they've been speaking to former diplomats, those in governments, and there's a certain element in politics that you don't always deal with people you like, whether that's personally or professionally, and sometimes to get things done you have to hold your nose and talk to these people, bring them in closer. It's better to be influencing from the inside rather than standing on the outside.
Well, we should not be appeasing Donald Trump. There is a clear difference between having diplomatic relationships with other countries, with other governments, and hosting people for a state banquet and all of this pageantry. And that is what's so offensive to people. And we want to say loud and clear to Keir Starmer and his government that they need to be standing up to Trump. Many people want to say that all of this kind of pageantry and engagement with Donald Trump will give us preferential terms for trade or other treatments. But what we're actually seeing is things like our digital services tax, a tax on big tech giants, are potentially on the chopping block as a result of our engagement with Donald Trump. And these are small taxes on some of the very richest companies, but these would raise, analysis from TaxWatch has shown, over £5 billion over the course of this parliament. That's money that we need for our schools, our hospitals, not going to the likes of Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg. So people aren't happy about that.
I understand that.
And
But
at the same time,
that is the way that the President of the United States operates. And many people will say, look, it's more than just one man. This is a special relationship between two nations. Donald Trump isn't going to be the president forever. It's better to have him closer than not. And in terms of everything you're saying there, how can the UK have a say or any influence in any of that happening without having a relationship with Donald Trump? And I take your point about the state banquet, but for all intents and purposes, what we've heard is this plays to Donald Trump. This butters him up, if you like. And if this is an advantage that the UK has that other countries don't, should we not be playing that card?
Well, I think even with the invitation that Keir Starmer made around this, trying to butter up Donald Trump, we saw that it hasn't worked. You know, while people point to the EU having certain lower tariffs, they actually have loads of exemptions. So the whole kind of package is that we end up with the same deal. And now when people tout bringing in investment, what you're looking at is opening up the UK, where big tech companies will come in, harvest our data and sell it off in the US. And what we need to have is a government that's going to say we need regulations and we need taxes so that these deals and these discussions are in the public interest. We cannot have Keir Starmer selling us out for what is very surface level positive politics, but doesn't make a material difference to people in the UK or elsewhere.
Jake, all very valid arguments that I'm sure you want Donald Trump to hear, but the reality of which is this ring of steel around Windsor, this gold carriage that he's going to be carried around in Windsor Castle and the grounds. He's not going to see you and he's not going to hear your message.
Well, I think already having Donald Trump having to meet the Prime Minister in Chequers is a victory. You know, most world leaders meet in Downing Street, and yet the thousands of people that will be in the streets tomorrow mean that that won't be happening. And so whilst people like to talk about pomp and circumstance, the reality is that, you know, Donald Trump will not be president forever, and we need to be working with other countries around the world who stand for internationalism, for fair trade, for human rights, and working with them, not just being the United States lackey, where we do not set our own tax policy or our own foreign policy and are completely beholden to the US. Yes, they are an ally, but President Trump is an authoritarian who is, you know, kidnapping his citizens off, or other people off the streets in the US and deporting them without due process. You know, the British people are sickened by a lot of what they see coming out of the US, and we don't want to be dragged along with that. We need to stand firm.
Jake, well, you've got your message across loud and clear on Sky News this evening. Thank you very much for your time. That's Jake Atkinson there from the Stop Trump Coalition protest planned, as Jake said, in Windsor and central London tomorrow, opposing the state visit. That there, the protesters' view, but like it or not, Donald Trump is the most powerful man in the Western world, so surely the UK has to forge a partnership with him, don't they? Well, here is Marine One. Donald Trump, I understand, is due to land in around 10 minutes or so on Air Force One. We'll keep right across this live picture. As soon as that plane lands, we'll bring you live pictures. The President and the First Lady is ascending the steps ready to get onto Marine One. That helicopter standing by to take them to central London and the American ambassador's residence, which is where they'll spend the first night of this 3-day visit. While we look at those scenes, let's bring in Professor Jeremy Black, author of A History of America. He joins us now. I'm sure you may well have caught some of my conversation there with Jake from the Stop Trump Coalition, him saying that, you know, we shouldn't be entertaining Donald Trump in this fashion. A state visit does not look good, considering Donald Trump's politics and what's happening, not just in America, but on the world stage at the moment. What's your view?
I think it's much more complicated than that. And I think we have to be wary of offending our major ally. I think we have to remember that we have all sorts of people come through on state visits. I think last year, I'm right in saying, President Xi of China came through, and I don't recall him being democratically elected. The fact of the matter is a state, for its foreign policy, unless it wishes to go to war, has to coexist with those states that are there and has to discuss matters with them. And, you know, Jake's entitled to his opinion. We're a free society. But, I mean, he's backing himself into a corner using terms like lackey and appeasement, for he has no idea what the government may or may not be discussing with the president on his visit. And I think one needs to be a bit more mature about this.
Yeah. I also feel like that kind of language has been used before when discussing this special relationship by those protesting the UK's closeness with America. 'Twas ever thus, if you like. But in terms of this state visit, there's been a lot of emphasis put on this, the historic nature of it being a second state visit for Donald Trump, playing to his sensibility, really. He loves the royal family. He likes the UK. He likes the Prime Minister. But does this kind of thing really work? Because Jake was pointing out there, he said, look, you know, we could do all of this and we're going to end up where the EU is. We're not really going to get preferential treatment. So I suppose the big question is, does all this pomp and ceremony, will it really work? Will it really get the UK an advantage?
Well, it may not. I mean, we're not party to private discussions. I mean, and, you know, we haven't always done what the Americans have wanted. I mean, I can recall, you know, the fury that Lyndon Johnson had towards Harold Wilson when we refused to participate in the Vietnam War. So, you know, allies do not always do the same as what their partners want. But the best thing is to be talking to people, and hopefully that they should listen a bit. You don't expect them to agree. I mean, President Trump, like one hopes Prime Minister Starmer, are people that pledge to support their national interest. And what one's trying to do in negotiations, what you try to do in diplomacy, is to try and produce nuances in which you can cooperate. You try and reach compromises in some areas. In some cases, you have to have trade-offs. And in some cases, you have to agree to differ. But when you agree to differ, it is best to agree to differ without bitterness. And the kind of public megaphone approach is very childish. It doesn't really play very well. And one has to ask of some of these people who are demonstrating, you know, what exactly do they do when dictators come and visit? And, you know, there is a slight degree or considerable degree of inconsistency here.
Yeah. In terms of what will be discussed, the sort of business end of things, if you like, once, you know, all the pomp and pageantry has come to a close. And we expect that to be checkers, day 3 of the Prime Minister's country residence. Things up for discussion, things like trade, security, foreign policy, the Middle East and Ukraine, and internet policing as well, freedom of speech. America seems to be talking a lot about the UK and its freedom of speech at the moment. What kind of conversations do you think will be had and what will be top of the agenda?
Well, I think all of those. I mean, clearly the most important thing for Britain is to try and see the avoidance of war and to try and see deterrence work. And one's thinking here not just of the European context, but also of East Asia. And British warship was in the Taiwan Straits last week. You know, we have allies such as Japan, South Korea. It is not in Britain's interest that there should be war in the Far East. So these are very serious discussions. And again, as I've said, you don't generally have serious discussions like that at megaphone level. There are issues in the Middle East. People have already referred to those. And then there are the question of political economy, how our society is coping in a very, very difficult fiscal and economic situation. And one reason it's a very good thing to touch base with the president again is simply this, that we're in a different position to where we were at the time of his first state visit. Since the first state visit, there is war in Europe. And, you know, as far as most commentators are concerned, this is a result of Russian aggression. And also in relative terms, our economy and our financial system is under enormous pressure, and much more so than was the case at the time of the first state visit. And we need, as it were, to respond to that. We need to try and ensure that in advancing his state interests, which President Trump will doubtless do, as indeed it is his duty to do, but that in advancing his state interests, we don't want to see ourselves as in the front line of as a target, as it were. So, yes, one wants to try and have compromise and nuance.
Well, let's see what comes out of the next 3 days. As you're right to point out, the world has changed since that first state visit. The mood has definitely changed around this first state visit. There were protests then, but all slightly different now. Thank you so much, Professor Jeremy Black. Here we are at Stansted Airport, live there. Our US correspondent Mark Stone is patiently waiting, along with the world's cameras, for the President and the First Lady to touch down in Air Force One. And Mark, I understand we're not too far away from that happening.
Yeah, we think around about 5 or 10 minutes' time. The Ryanair flights are still taking off from here. I think they'll close the airspace shortly before his flight lands. I think, as I say, it's about 10 minutes away. We've seen already that Marine One and the support helicopter have already arrived. They're waiting here. And when he gets off the plane, he will walk across to one of those two helicopters, take to the air and fly the short journey down from here in Essex to Winfield House in Regent's Park, where he will spend the night. Winfield House, the residence of the US ambassador to the United Kingdom. So he'll spend his first night there. And you know, SJ, just spending the past 20 minutes or so, or half an hour or so here, it is so fascinating to see just what the movement of the American president looks like, what it looks like when he travels. I mean, just so much apparatus. There are the helicopters which have been flown over inside transport jets, especially for this. There is a band from the airmen, I should say, aviators from the Royal Air Force as well. And just behind me now, I can see officials beginning to arrive, waiting the president himself. The Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, among them. I don't know if we can spin our camera around. We'll give it a go so you can see. There is the Foreign Secretary, only in the job for a couple of weeks, talking to, I guess, perhaps the Chief Constable of Essex Police, I'm guessing there. But protocol has it that she is the person who greets the President when he arrives here. You know, SJ, perhaps it's a cheap shot, but I did have a quick look to see what Yvette Cooper had said about Donald Trump in the past, of course, before she was in government. And obviously, like many people on the left of politics here in the UK, she did have a few words about him in the past. She's called him inflammatory and ignorant. She attended a women's march a few years back where she was heavily critical of the language that Donald Trump has used about women in the past. So clearly that is awkward. Perhaps a cheap shot, given that she's now in government. She can't really express those personal views. But what I did think, SJ, which was very interesting, is we got a sense of what. I think what's changed, because back in 2019, for his last state visit, she wasn't in government. She massively opposed it. And she opposed it because she said that he represented a threat to democracy, that he was alienating America's allies. And for that reason, she did not think he was welcome for a state visit. Of course, he came. Now, what's changed? Well, her personal views may not have changed, but what has changed is that in Donald Trump's second term, he has proved that in the short term, at least, for the duration of this term, he kind of holds the cards, and if countries are not close to him, then they will feel it. If they, this is all about trade. It is all about foreign policy. It is all about security. It's not as though Britain has decided that it's better to be close to the Americans under Trump. They have decided, the British government has decided that it is absolutely vital. It is in the UK's national interests on security, on trade, on foreign policy and all the rest of it to be very close to Donald Trump. And so here she is, a woman who has been so critical of him in the past. As Foreign Secretary now, she will greet Donald Trump off that plane in a few moments' time.
Mark, thank you. Yeah, as we've been reflecting throughout the hour here, there is so much awkwardness around this trip. And for many people, it's sort of holding their nose and getting on with it, if you like. The UK has no say in who is the President of the United States, and they have to work with him. The country's special relationship stays the course. Prime ministers and presidents come and go. My colleague Yalda Hakim is following events from Kyiv tonight, having spoken to President Zelensky yesterday ahead of this 3-day state visit to the UK by the US president. Because, Yalda, the UK and the United States will be following this state visit, but given what's going on in the world, so will so many world leaders. The ramifications of a discussion between Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer and President Donald Trump could be so important on so many different fronts.
Yeah, absolutely, SJ. And as Mark was saying there, this trip is about so many things, including trade and, of course, foreign policy, and front and centre of what Keir Starmer wants to do, leading this coalition of the so-called willing other European leaders that he's been rallying alongside the French President Emmanuel Macron to try and convince Donald Trump that he too needs to care deeply about the situation in Ukraine. Of course, that is why the Ukrainian president was so keen to speak to us, to try and pass on a message very directly to the US president, who is on this second state visit to the UK. And as you've been reporting, we're expecting him to arrive any minute now and be whisked away on Marine One to the US ambassador's residency. But I've also got Mark Stone standing by. And Mark, we are waiting for the US president to arrive any minute now. I'm here in Kyiv. So many issues will be on the agenda, including the situation in Gaza, including what is happening here on the ground in Ukraine.
Yeah, a very good evening, Yalda. From a dark Stansted airport, just coming up to 9 o'clock in the evening here. And I imagine that Air Force One is on its final approach now here to the airport, where US President Donald Trump will be greeted for this unprecedented second state visit. He has said it so many times. He's called it a fest. He has expressed just how excited he is about it. He's talked about his love for the royal family, his love for all things British, maybe slightly less so for the government of Keir Starmer, but it is certainly the case that there has been an unlikely friendship that has blossomed between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump over the past few months. It feels like quite a long time since Keir Starmer revealed that letter from the King back in the Oval Office back in February. That was, I suppose, the Trump card up front by Britain. They played their best card, the card that they believed would bring the American president in close, because it is the view of this British government that it's not just important to have him close, it's important to keep him as close as possible, because he has proved himself to be really so consequential on issues of trade, but so much more as well. I mean, from where you are in Kyiv, it's clear how much he has flip-flopped on the issue of the war in Ukraine. And so important for countries in Europe, led by the UK, the British government would say, to be able to gently, softly, or perhaps with a bit more force, pressure the US president, remind him that, yes, Europe is spending more now on defence, but they can't do it alone. They need his support and they need his hardware. They need him and they need America in Europe. So that is an element of what all this pomp and circumstance will be all about over the next day or so.
Yeah, Mark, as you say, and this is something that President Volodymyr Zelensky is acutely aware of, that regardless of whatever blow-up he had at the White House with Donald Trump, he needs to ensure that that U.S. support remains. And he sees Sir Keir Starmer as a strong ally. He sees him as a backer and supporter. And he said to me, I know that President Trump has great respect for King Charles. I know he has great respect for the monarchy. He has now developed a relationship, a rapport and friendship with the British Prime Minister. So I'm relying on them to be able to convey the message of Ukraine, because, of course, it will be a topic of a conversation and discussion during Donald Trump's visit to Chequers. And so Volodymyr Zelensky very much wants to make sure that that message is heard loud and clear. And Mark, it'll be interesting to see how Donald Trump responds and reacts, because, as you say, he has been flipping and flopping even in the last few days. He's finally described Russia as the aggressor, but at the same time pointed the finger of blame at the Europeans and said, this is your war, and you need to stop buying Russian oil and gas, and only then will I impose sanctions, tough sanctions on Russia.
Yeah, look, I think so much will be discussed, not necessarily tomorrow. That is the bit at Windsor. That's the pomp. But on Thursday, the meat of it will be discussed. And I think it's important to recognise that this isn't just pomp. There is a lot of meat that will be discussed on Thursday at Chequers with the Prime Minister. Remember, too, that it's not just the President who's here. His Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, he is here as well. Steve Witkoff, Donald Trump's kind of fixer-in-chief, the Middle East envoy, but also has been so critical, so integral in America's negotiations with both Russia and Ukraine. He is here in London too. So alongside the principals meeting, that is Starmer and Trump, there will be very, very vital sideline meetings as well taking place between Yvette Cooper, Foreign Secretary, and Marco Rubio. She met him earlier on today when he arrived from Israel. So talks there, of course, but also with Steve Witkoff, trying gently to persuade the Americans, as I say, that they cannot abandon Europe. I mean, Yalda, it's not all that long ago that we were... The language coming out of the White House made it very clear at that point that America under Trump really was looking at effectively abandoning NATO. And yet, as is his way, quite quickly, he then came back on board because NATO demonstrated that it was spending more on its own defence, the other NATO countries, that is. And so he liked that, so he came back on board. He will like the fact, for example, that Britain is supplying jets, fast jets, to Eastern Europe. It is deploying fast jets to Eastern Europe to counter this latest threat from Russia with the drones that landed in Romania. So all that sort of stuff is clearly important to the American president, but it's not enough. I think there's always an anxiety that he could flip again the other way. And so I guess, as I said a moment ago, playing this card so soon was an effective way, so Keir Starmer and the diplomats who were advising him, so they hope, of being able to flatter the president and make him, a real friend of the United Kingdom, notwithstanding all the criticism that he and more so his vice president, J.D. Vance, have had over things like free speech. And I'm sure all that will play into the next couple of days as well. So a really vitally important visit. And of course, there will be a lot of criticism of it too. We've heard of some contributors to the show a little bit earlier on describing how they think it's not necessary to do this. It's not necessary to roll out the red carpet. It's enough to be able to have these backroom diplomatic discussions. The problem is that I would argue that it's probably not enough with Trump. He needs this flattery. It kind of is what it is. And warts and all, controversy and all, Starmer's government has made a judgment, and we will discover whether that judgment's right, but has made a judgment that this is the sort of thing that is required.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark, especially with an unpredictable US president like Donald Trump. Welcome to our viewers. It's just gone 9 o'clock. You're watching The World with me, Yalda Hakim. And you're watching those live images from Stansted Airport, where Donald Trump is expected to arrive any minute now for his, as we've been saying, second state visit to the UK. The US president will spend 2 days in the country and will meet with the King, the Prince and Princess of Wales and the Prime Minister. And of course, as Mark was just saying there, he's arriving at a tricky time for Keir Starmer, whose judgment really is being questioned over his sacked US ambassador's links to the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. He's flying into Europe as we've seen serious escalations in the two wars he's promised to end in Gaza and in Ukraine. And I am currently in Ukraine. It's just gone 11 o'clock in the evening, where in the last 24 hours we've had an exclusive interview with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who, knowing that Donald Trump was making this much anticipated trip to the United Kingdom, wanted to send a very clear message to Donald Trump and to his European allies, in particular to Sir Keir Starmer, that as you sit down and have these conversations, I know that Ukraine will be on the agenda. You have to remember that you must be tough on Vladimir Putin. And Mark, it was quite a conversation that I had with Volodymyr Zelensky. He wanted to make those messages very clear, not just to the British public, to the British Prime Minister, but hoping that Donald Trump would be able to hear him too. And we're just looking at those live pictures coming in from Stansted Airport, and we can see an aircraft landing. Mark, just give us a sense of what you're seeing there, because I know that Marine One is waiting. The officials have arrived, and we're expecting Donald Trump to arrive imminently there.
Yes, and you can see here some of the dignitaries are waiting for the arrival of the US president. Yvette Cooper is just behind the woman in uniform. Yvette Cooper, of course, now Foreign Secretary. To her left, behind the, to her immediate left is Lord Hood, who is what's known as the Lord-in-Waiting to the King. He will greet the president off the plane. The woman in uniform there is the Lord Lieutenant of Essex, Jennifer Tolhurst. Those two officials, alongside the member of the government, the Foreign Secretary, as I say, Yvette Cooper, and behind them you can see some airmen, some aviators from the RAF regiment who are here as well. I've also seen some US Army as well. There are two US Army Chinooks that have just landed a short time ago. They, we think, will flank Marine One as it flies from here down to Winfield House in Regent's Park. And on the left of your shot there, you can see Air Force One just on its final approach here to Stansted Airport. So the beginning of 2 days, which Donald Trump certainly taken by his words on Air Force One and on the South Lawn of the White House before he left. He's excited about this moment. We know how much he loves the royal family. He's talked about his love and affection for the Queen so much, the late Queen, and also for King Charles as well. So he's looking forward to this. For him, well, to use his words, this is a fest. That's how he described it in the Oval Office a few months ago. For Britain, it's about pomp, it's about circumstance, it's about a whole load of diplomacy as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. And they're not holding back when it comes to the pomp and ceremony. They are pulling out every bell and whistle for this trip, because for Britain, this remains an incredibly special, significant, the most important of relationships. And so they want to ensure that Donald Trump gets the treatment that he is expecting, and probably more so. Donald Trump himself said that even before he left, he said he's looking forward to meeting with the King, King Charles. He described him as a friend. At the time that Keir Starmer handed that letter from the King to him, he said he has great admiration and respect for the King, is very much looking forward to making that trip, that second state visit that has been afforded to Donald Trump. And Mark, we can see Air Force One has just landed there at Stansted Airport.
Yeah, just touched down here at Stansted. It will make its way now to the end of the runway, pull back round and arrive here for the dignitaries to meet the president. And from there, he'll make a short walk over to Marine One and then drive down to Winfield House. Yelda, I was looking back a few moments ago at a speech that Lord Mandelson, Ambassador Peter Mandelson, that was now fired, of course, that he gave just about 10 days ago, a few days before he was fired. Now, I mean, I think clearly his views reflect the British government's views about why this visit is so important. He was at the heart of the organising for it until he was fired for those links to Jeffrey Epstein. I'll read a bit of it to you because I think it's important. He said, "We can disagree on issues, and we do, but we cannot be fair weather friends," he said, talking about America. "Not when we want to be close partners in good times and influential voices in difficult times." And he continued by saying, this has always relied on strategic depth, not just personal interaction. So in order to get that strategic depth, whoever the president is, I think the argument by Lord Mandelson and by extension by the British government is you need that personal interaction, and that can be difficult sometimes. I mean, it's clear that the political alignment, well, there is no political alignment between the government of Keir Starmer and that of Donald Trump. But the relationship, the special relationship, is so much deeper than that. You know, countless diplomats over the years have talked to me about that. It transcends different governments. It transcends different presidents. Yes, it's come under an awful lot of strain, certainly under the first presidency of Donald Trump, and also under this one, with tariffs, with his flip-flopping on Ukraine, with his position on Gaza, Ukraine. It has flip-flopped. It has come under pressure. But the special relationship that the UK holds on to so tightly, the argument by the British government is that it transcends those difficulties and that you have to build as much as you can on the relationship that you have got. And I also think, Yalda, you know, I talked to diplomats from other countries based in Washington, and they've said over the past few months how envious they are of the way that Britain has played it with President Trump. Yes, some may see it as sycophantic. I mean, honestly, the way that Prime Minister Starmer appeared to be fawning over the president in the Oval Office was for many kind of uncomfortable. But the consequence was that Britain is in a better position on trade than any other country in the world. That may not last. He's an unpredictable president, but for now, it is good. And I think what they will want to do over the course of the next 2 days and well beyond is to build on that, and that they will hope that all this pomp, that it does build on that and that it yields results.
Yeah, Mark, certainly we saw a roll call of global leaders making their way to Donald Trump after his inauguration to try and woo him. There were all sorts of things that people were suggesting, diplomats were suggesting. And as you say, many were envious of the way in which Sir Keir Starmer was able to manage this relationship. And he did have that Trump card, that knowing that Donald Trump has so much admiration for the royal family, he is going to ensure that, just like top diplomats, they are going to be pulled out and for this two-day state visit used to really woo Donald Trump and show him the kind of pomp and ceremony that he is expecting out of this trip. And it is going to be, Mark, an incredibly jam-packed itinerary. As you say, he's going to be making his way to the US ambassador's residence in central London after he gets off Air Force One, he's going to be whisked away on Marine One. But from that point onwards, tomorrow morning, he's going to have an incredibly busy schedule.
Yeah, look, if you're a member of the public and you want to get a sight of Donald Trump in the flesh, good luck to you, because I don't think many people will. He could, of course, drive from here in Essex down to the ambassador's residence at Winfield House. He's not going to. That is in part because of security. He will instead, as we've been saying, fly down there on Marine One. Tomorrow he will fly from Winfield House to the outskirts of West London to Windsor, where that event will take place. He will stay tomorrow night in Windsor, and then once again he will fly from there up to Chequers in Buckinghamshire for the meat of the visit and the meeting with Prime Minister Keir Starmer. I have to say, Yalda, I'm standing about 100 foot now from Air Force One. It's quite an awesome sight to be so close to this hulk of a plane, such an iconic aircraft as it arrives here in the UK for what is, you know, a huge, and as Trump has said so many times, unprecedented second state visit. The door's just opening there on Air Force One. The steps will shortly be moved into position, and then in a few moments I'm sure we'll see the US President disembarking, and from the back steps the rest of the passengers, the crew, the travelling media, all disembarking now from the back of the aircraft as well. The steps just being moved into position now. This is a massive security feat, Yalda, and it's been upped even more, I think, after the death, the murder, the assassination of Charlie Kirk over the course of the last week in the United States. Clearly, the president himself, two assassination attempts against the US president. There is massive, massive security. The Secret Service have been here in the UK for the past week, perhaps longer, going over everything. Our security was checked multiple times as we made our way to the tarmac here at Stansted, and that will continue over the course of the next 2 days as well, as they keep the American president safe. But as for anyone wanting a glimpse of the president, that won't happen, I don't think. Few will see that because he will be kept away from the crowds. That is partly security. It's partly to keep him away from the protesters as well. I'm interested to know how many protesters there will be. You'll remember the last time he had a state visit, there were really quite large protests. There was that blow-up blimp of Donald Trump that was floating above Parliament Square. Will that make an outing again this time? We will see.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, you just talked about what a monumental security operation this is. I mean, when the US president moves, the security detail is absolutely extraordinary. You and I saw that in full play when he went to the Middle East. We were there on the ground. And of course, to see Marine One brought here on the back of transport aircraft to the United Kingdom so he can make that journey to the US president's, US ambassador's residence. Just the task, the number of people involved in ensuring that the US president is safe. But he's just landed at Stansted Airport now. The stairs, as you say, have been put in place, and any minute now we are expecting the US President Donald Trump alongside the First Lady Melania and a number of members of his cabinet who are here with him as part of what he's described as an unprecedented second state visit, which was a letter sent to him in the hands of Sir Keir Starmer many months ago, and the culmination of all of that we can now see as he has touched down, Air Force One touchdown at Stansted Airport, and the dignitaries there getting ready to greet Donald Trump.
Yes, and you know, for all the talk, Yalda, of red carpets, I'm a little surprised there isn't one here. When he arrived in the Middle East, there were red carpets, there were purple carpets, all the rest of it. I mean, you know, the Middle East is a little different from the UK, perhaps a little more gaudy than here, but no red carpet for the president here. But you can be sure that at Windsor, I think they will more than make up for that. But yeah, we can see the dignitaries taking their positions now at the base of the steps, and I'm sure that we will see the president emerging in that doorway in the next few moments.
That's right. And as you were saying, yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
No, go ahead. No, go on.
No. I was just going to talk about the dignitaries that we are expecting there to welcome Donald Trump. He will be greeted by the US Ambassador Warren Stevens, as well as the British Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper, who will be there to welcome Donald Trump at the start of his second state visit to the UK. But Mark, over to you.
Yeah, and also the King's Colour Squadron from the Royal Air Force Regiment lined up here alongside the dignitaries. Representing the government is the Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, and then alongside her we've got Lord Hood, who is the Lord-in-Waiting to the King, and the Lord Lieutenant of Essex as well, Jennifer Tolhurst. Those are the three officials who will be the first to greet the US President as he descends the steps here. And we're seeing also, I've just seen coming out of the back steps, the most important people within Donald Trump's administration who have travelled with him here, his Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles. She has arrived in the last few moments. His Director of Communications, Stephen Chung, just getting off the plane. And there is the President and the First Lady, Melania.
That's right, Mark. We can see those live images now. It's just gone about 9:20 in the evening. US President coming down those stairs with the First Lady, Melania, to be greeted by, as you say, the US Ambassador Warren Stevens, as well as the British Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper, and the Viscount Hood, the King's Lord-in-Waiting. So you can see those images there, Donald Trump meeting with the US Ambassador as he makes this unprecedented second state visit to the United Kingdom. Much anticipated trip following Sir Keir Starmer's invitation to the US president many months ago when Donald Trump first re-entered the White House. And Sir Keir Starmer was one of the very first leaders, global leaders, to visit him and make it known that this is a special relationship that they want to continue to strengthen. So this is an important trip for the United Kingdom. Donald Trump says he's very much looking forward to the pomp and ceremony. He's expecting that. And he's very much looking forward to meeting with King Charles. Before he left Washington, he described King Charles as a friend. And he's often showed great admiration for the royal family. He's also expected to visit the tomb of the late Queen Elizabeth. But we can see him there with the First Lady, hand in hand, and being directed towards Marine One, where he will be whisked away to make a short trip to central London, where he will be spending the night at the US Ambassador's residence, Winfield House in Regent's Park, before the events of the two-day visit begin. And Mark, we were saying there that this is going to be a jam-packed trip. The royal activities will begin with formal greetings by the King and Queen Camilla, along with Prince William and Princess Catherine at Windsor Castle tomorrow. But tonight he's going to rest at the US Ambassador's residence in central London.
Yeah, and a reminder there, just as he got off the plane and walked to the helicopter, that this is a state visit. This is primarily a royal occasion. This is not government to government, although of course it is all about that. But the person who greeted him first off the plane was not Yvette Cooper. She was just after. It wasn't the Foreign Secretary, it wasn't a representative of the government. It was Lord Hood, the Lord-in-Waiting to the King, and it was he who then escorted the President to the helicopter. So a sort of clear reminder there that this is about the royal visit. This is about this is a state visit. I thought that was interesting. What was also interesting, Yalda, was the length of time that Yvette Cooper shook the President's hand for. It must have been, it was at least 5-10 seconds. This from a woman who, not all that long ago, before she was in government, called Donald Trump inflammatory and ignorant, who had such criticism of his language over women. She, of course, a champion for women's rights, and yet felt able and keen to criticize him out of government. Now, of course, she finds herself as Foreign Secretary. The other thing I think is interesting is then when he was last here for his first state visit, she was very critical of that. She said it shouldn't have happened because Donald Trump was alienating allies, was a threat to democracy. Well, that, I think, is a very clear indication of how things have changed, because Trump, in his second presidency, has proved that if you're not close to him, if you're not in, you're out. And so that is why, that kind of gets to the heart of why this royal trip, this state visit is so important, why it's happening, because Britain has taken the view that you don't just need to be close. It is in Britain's vital interests to be as close as possible to the US president. As one senior diplomat said to me today, everything that isn't American leadership is worse. And that, I think, gets to the heart of what all this is all about.